only takes 30 seconds to destroy someone's reputation. But sometimes 30 more seconds can destroy your entire career. A single father was publicly handcuffed inside his own building while hundreds of employees watched. The district attorney smiled. She thought she'd finally caught another criminal. She thought she'd already won. Then she looked into his eyes. Everything changed because the man standing in handcuffs was the last person who could end her career with a single word. If you've ever been judged before anyone knew your story, this one is for you. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe, because stories like this prove that the truth always has a way of catching up. Now, let's go back 48 hours before all this happened. Monday mornings were always brutal, but this one had a different vibe. It was about to expose a network of brutal problems. But right now, that is a little far-fetched. Let's see how the morning unrolled. By 7:30 in the morning, the glass skyscraper at the center of downtown was already alive. Employees rushed through the revolving doors, balancing coffee cups and laptops. Executives barked orders into Bluetooth headsets. Receptionists greeted clients with practiced smiles. Cleaning crews quietly disappeared into elevators before anyone noticed they'd been there. To the outside world, it looked like every other successful corporate headquarters. 42 floors, thousands of employees, billions of dollars flowing through its offices every year. A building people pointed at and said, "Whoever owns that place must live like a king." The funny thing was, almost nobody inside had ever met the owner. The company had an unusual rule. The owner never used the executive entrance, never parked in the private garage, never attended shareholder parties. He never appeared on magazine covers. Most employees wouldn't recognize him if he stood beside them in the elevator, which happened more often than they realized. At exactly 7:42 a.m., a faded blue pickup truck rolled into the employee parking lot. It had over 200,000 miles on it. One headlight was slightly cloudy. The paint had begun peeling near the tailgate. It looked completely out of place, surrounded by luxury sedans and imported SUVs. The driver switched off the engine. For a moment, he simply sat there, listening, not to music, to laughter. It came from the back seat. "Dad," a little girl's voice, "you promised pancakes tonight." The man smiled into the rearview mirror. "I remember. No takeout. No takeout. No work calls." He raised one hand like he was taking an oath. "I solemnly swear, tonight belongs to Lily." The little girl giggled. She couldn't have been older than 8. Golden brown hair tied into a messy ponytail, a backpack almost bigger than she was, and the kind of smile that could erase the worst day imaginable. "Dad, yeah, you always keep your promises." He looked at her through the mirror. "I'll do everything I can." That promise meant more than anyone could have known. 3 years earlier, Lily had lost her mother to an aggressive illness that moved faster than the doctors expected. One ordinary Tuesday, their family had become 2 people instead of 3. Jason never remarried, never even tried. Every morning, he braided Lily's hair after watching online tutorials. Every lunchbox carried a handwritten note. Every school recital, every parent-teacher meeting, every scraped knee. He was there. Friends often told him, "You don't have to do everything yourself." Jason always gave the same answer. "I know, but she's already lost one parent. I'm not letting her feel like she's losing another." Lily unbuckled her seatbelt. Before climbing out, she wrapped her small arms around her father's neck. "I love you." Jason closed his eyes for a brief second. "I love you more. You always say that, because it's always true." She smiled. "See you this afternoon." "You'll see me." A small yellow school bus stopped beside the curb. Jason waited until Lily climbed aboard. Then he stood there, watching through the window until the bus finally pulled away. Only after it disappeared around the corner did he head toward the building. Nobody paid much attention to him. Why would they? He wore dark jeans, a simple charcoal jacket, scuffed work boots, no expensive watch, no designer briefcase, no security detail. Several employees walked past him without a second glance. One young analyst even held the lobby door open. "Morning." Jason smiled. "Morning." The analyst nodded politely, thinking he'd just helped another maintenance contractor. The lobby was enormous. White marble floors, towering glass walls, a waterfall feature stretching 2 stories high. Everything about it screamed success. Employees hurried toward the elevators. Nobody noticed the quiet man crossing the lobby, except one person, a newly hired security guard. He frowned, looked down at Jason's boots, then at the old canvas messenger bag slung over his shoulder. Something about him didn't fit the picture of the executives walking through the building. The guard stepped in front of him. "Excuse me." Jason stopped. "Can I help you?" "Employee badge." Jason smiled politely. "I don't carry one." The guard frowned. "No badge?" "No. No visitor pass either." Jason shook his head. The guard's posture stiffened. "Then you can't be in this building." Several nearby employees slowed their pace. Watching, Jason remained calm. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." The guard folded his arms. "I don't think there has." For the first time that morning, people stopped walking. Heads began turning. Conversations faded. One woman whispered, "Who's that?" Another shrugged. "No idea." A young manager smirked. "Probably another guy trying to sneak into the building." Jason glanced around the lobby, then back at the guard. He spoke with the same calm tone he'd used from the beginning. "I'd rather not make a scene." The guard took one step closer. "I'm afraid that decision isn't yours anymore." The security guard didn't move. Neither did Jason. For a brief moment, the entire lobby seemed to pause. Employees slowed their pace. Some stopped completely. Others pretended to check their phones while secretly watching. Nobody wanted to miss what was happening. Jason kept his voice calm. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else." The guard folded his arms. "I don't think I have." "You don't have an employee badge." "No." "You don't have a visitor's pass." "No." "Then you're trespassing." Jason let out a quiet breath. "I assure you, I'm not." The guard reached for his radio. "Control, This is lobby security. We've got an unauthorized individual refusing to identify himself." Jason never interrupted. He simply stood there, hands visible, completely relaxed. Within seconds, 2 more security officers walked across the lobby. One was older. The other looked like he'd only been on the job a few months. "What have we got?" The first guard pointed at Jason. "No ID, no badge, no visitor authorization." The older officer looked Jason up and down. "You here for construction?" Jason smiled faintly. "No. Maintenance. No. Delivery." Jason shook his head. "I'm here for work." The younger officer laughed. "Doing what?" Jason answered without hesitation. "Running the company." For half a second, nobody spoke. Then the younger guard burst into laughter. "So you're the owner now?" A few nearby employees chuckled. One woman whispered, "This should be good." The older guard wasn't laughing. He studied Jason for a moment. "You got any proof?" Jason reached into his jacket. The guards immediately stiffened. Instead of pulling out a weapon, he removed a worn leather wallet. Inside, there were family photos, a driver's license, a credit card, nothing flashy. He handed over the license. The older guard glanced at it. "Jason Walker." He handed it back. "Nice, but that doesn't prove you belong here." Jason nodded. "Fair enough." He slipped the wallet away. "If you call the executive office, they'll clear this up." The younger guard laughed again. "Oh, of course. And after that, maybe the president will come down and apologize too." More laughter echoed across the lobby. Jason didn't react. From the reception desk, a young receptionist watched everything unfold. She had only worked there for 3 weeks. Something didn't sit right with her. It wasn't what Jason was saying. It was how he was saying it. People lying usually talked too much. This man barely spoke at all. She quietly leaned toward her supervisor. "Shouldn't we call someone upstairs?" The supervisor didn't even look up. "Security has it handled." "But what if he belonged here? He'd have a badge." The receptionist looked back toward Jason. For some reason, she wasn't convinced. The younger guard stepped closer. "I'm going to ask you one last time. Why are you really here?" Jason looked around the lobby, at the employees pretending not to stare, at the security cameras, at the growing crowd, then back at the guard. "I came to work." The younger guard smiled sarcastically. So did everyone else. Without another word, he reached for Jason's arm. The older guard hesitated. "You sure? We've got enough." Jason calmly stepped back. "I wouldn't recommend grabbing me." The younger guard frowned. "Is that a threat?" "No, it's advice." The younger guard grabbed his wrist anyway. Jason didn't pull away, didn't resist, didn't even tense his muscles. He simply allowed it to happen. The receptionist's stomach tightened. Something felt wrong. Not dangerous, just wrong. She picked up the phone. "Executive office." The line rang once, twice, 3 times. Nobody answered. She frowned. The executive assistants were always in by now. Behind Jason, the crowd continued to grow. Someone started recording with their phone. Another employee whispered, "Looks like security finally caught someone. I heard he's been pretending to work here." "No way." That's what they said. Within seconds, rumors spread through the lobby faster than facts ever could. The younger guard pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "You are being detained for trespassing until the police arrive." Several employees gasped. Others smiled. Jason looked at the handcuffs, then quietly held out his wrists. The older guard blinked. "You're not going to fight this." Jason looked at him. "No." "Why?" Jason's answer caught him completely off guard. "Because if I have to explain who I am, then no explanation will matter." The older guard stared at him. He had worked security for nearly 20 years. He'd dealt with angry executives, drunk clients, aggressive trespassers, but he'd never met someone this calm. It wasn't confidence. It wasn't arrogance. It was something else, almost like he'd seen this kind of misunderstanding before. The handcuffs clicked shut. Click. The sound echoed through the marble lobby. Phones immediately rose into the air. Employees whispered. Some laughed. Others simply watched. Jason lowered his eyes for a brief moment. Not because he was ashamed, but because he knew exactly what those handcuffs meant. By lunchtime, someone would post the video online. By evening, millions of strangers would have already decided who he was. None of them would know the truth. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then the whispers began, quiet at first, then louder, until the entire lobby was buzzing. "Did you see that? They actually arrested him. I knew something was off. He didn't even have a badge. I heard he tried pretending he owned the company." The rumor spread from one side of the lobby to the other in seconds. Every person who repeated it added something new. By the time it reached the elevators, Jason had somehow become a dangerous con artist who'd been stealing millions from the company. Jason heard every word. He never corrected anyone because experience had taught him something years ago. People who want the truth ask questions. People who want entertainment create answers. The younger security guard tightened his grip on Jason's arm. "Let's go." Jason nodded. "Lead the way." The older guard walked beside them. He still wasn't convinced. Everything about this man felt wrong, not dangerous. Wrong. As they escorted Jason across the marble lobby, employees instinctively stepped aside. Some stared openly. Others secretly recorded with their phones. One man whispered to his coworker, "Imagine trying to bluff your way into a place like this." His coworker laughed. Some people will do anything for money. Neither of them knew. The quiet man walking between the guards had built the company from a one-room office 20 years earlier. The receptionist couldn't stop watching. She looked down at her computer. Something suddenly caught her attention. On the company's internal homepage, a notice had just appeared. "Owner arriving today." She frowned. "Owner, today?" She quickly clicked the message. It disappeared. Someone had already removed it. She immediately dialed the executive floor again. Still no answer. This time, she called the CEO's office. Straight to voicemail. "That's Strain," she whispered. The CEO never ignored calls on Monday mornings. Outside, a police cruiser rolled to the front entrance. 2 officers stepped out, professional, calm, used to dealing with corporate disturbances. One of them approached the guards. "What happened?" The younger guard answered proudly. "Unauthorized individual. Refused to identify himself. Claims he owns the building." The officers looked at Jason. One raised an eyebrow. "You own the building?" Jason smiled politely. "I do." The younger guard laughed again. "See, I told you." The police officer turned back to Jason. "Sir, do you have anyone who can verify that?" Jason thought for a second. "I could make one phone call." The younger guard immediately interrupted. "That's what they all say." The officer nodded slowly. "He's got a point." Jason didn't argue. "If that's your decision." The officer looked surprised. "You're taking this pretty well." Jason answered honestly. Getting angry has never solved a misunderstanding. Just then, the front doors opened again. A convoy of black SUVs pulled up outside. 5 of them, perfectly polished, government license plates. Every conversation inside the lobby stopped. The younger guard looked toward the entrance. "What's this?" The older guard quietly replied. "Government." The first SUV door opened. Several agents stepped out. Dark suits, earpieces, scanning the surroundings with practiced eyes. They weren't local police. They belonged to the district attorney's office. Employees immediately straightened their posture. Someone whispered, "The district attorney is here." Another employee gasped. "Why would she come here?" "No idea, but somebody's in serious trouble." The glass doors opened once more. A woman in her early 40s stepped inside. Sharp navy suit, confident stride. Every step carried authority. She didn't need to introduce herself. Everyone knew exactly who she was. District Attorney Evelyn Carter, known throughout the city for one reason. She never lost. Corporate fraud, political corruption, financial crime. If Evelyn Carter showed up personally, someone's career usually ended before sunset. The younger security guard smiled. "Perfect timing." He nodded toward Jason. "We've already got your suspect." The lobby grew silent. Every eye turned toward the district attorney. She looked at Jason, then at the handcuffs, then back at the security guards. A slow smile spread across her face. "So," she said calmly, "I finally get to meet the man who's been causing all this trouble." Jason met her gaze, said nothing. The district attorney stepped closer, completely convinced. She had just walked into the easiest arrest of her career. The district attorney walked slowly across the lobby. The sound of her heels echoed against the marble floor. Every employee instinctively stepped aside. Nobody wanted to be in her way. She had built a reputation that terrified boardrooms across the state. If Evelyn Carter walked into your company, someone usually walked out in handcuffs. Today, she thought she'd already found that person. She stopped directly in front of Jason. For several seconds, she simply studied him. The worn boots, the faded jeans, the old canvas messenger bag, the handcuffs. Nothing about him looked important. Nothing about him looked powerful. He looked exactly like the kind of man she'd arrested hundreds of times before. She smiled. "So, you're the man who claims to own this building?" Jason nodded once. "I am." Several employees laughed. The younger security guard couldn't hide his grin. "You say, I told you." Evelyn folded her arms. "I've prosecuted billion-dollar fraud cases. I've dismantled criminal organizations. I've put CEOs behind bars." She took one step closer. "And do you know something they all had in common?" Jason remained silent. They all believed they were the smartest person in the room. The lobby filled with quiet chuckles. Jason looked at her calmly. "I don't believe that." No. What do you believe?" Jason answered without hesitation. "That misunderstandings happen." Her smile widened. "And you think this is just one big misunderstanding?" "I do." She shook her head. "No, this," she gestured toward the handcuffs, "is called probable cause." One of the police officers stepped closer. "Ma'am," he requested one phone call. Before Jason could speak, Evelyn cut him off. "So he can call another accomplice." Jason sighed quietly. "I was going to call my assistant." She laughed. "Of course you were." Several employees laughed with her. One whispered, "This guy just keeps digging." Evelyn slowly circled Jason, like a prosecutor studying a witness. "You know what I find interesting?" Jason looked at her. "People who lie always make themselves the hero, the owner, the victim, the misunderstood genius." She stopped directly in front of him again. But eventually, the truth catches up. Jason didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He didn't even look offended. He simply asked, "Are you finished?" The question caught her off guard. "What?" I asked. "Are you finished?" For the first time, the smile faded slightly. "You don't seem to understand your situation." Jason answered quietly. "I understand it perfectly." She leaned closer. "No, I don't think you do." She lowered her voice so only he could hear. "When the press gets hold of this, they'll remember your face. When your daughter grows up, she'll remember it too." For the first time that morning, something changed inside Jason. Not anger, not fear, just disappointment. He looked her in the eyes. "My daughter has nothing to do with this." The older security guard noticed it immediately. That was the first personal thing Jason had said all morning. He glanced at Evelyn. Something about bringing the man's child into the conversation didn't sit right with him, but Evelyn didn't notice. She thought she'd finally broken through his calm exterior. She smiled again. "Then perhaps you should have thought about her before pretending to be someone you're not." Several employees nodded. One woman quietly whispered, "She's right." Another replied, "I feel sorry for the little girl." Rumors spread instantly. "He has a daughter. Imagine having a father arrested like this. That's heartbreaking." Jason closed his eyes for one brief second. Not because of the handcuffs, not because of the humiliation, because somewhere across town, Lily was sitting in a classroom, completely unaware that hundreds of strangers were already deciding what kind of father she had. Just then, the elevator at the far end of the lobby opened. The entire executive team stepped out. The CEO, the chief financial officer, the general counsel, several senior vice presidents. They had all rushed downstairs after finally hearing there was an incident in the lobby. The CEO looked irritated. What on earth is going on down here? The younger security guard immediately answered. We caught an impersonator. The CEO frowned. An impersonator? Yes, sir. He claims he owns the company. The executives instinctively turned toward the man in handcuffs. Jason slowly looked back at them. The moment the CEO saw his face, he froze. The color drained from his face. The chief financial officer stopped walking. The general counsel's briefcase slipped from his hand and hit the marble floor with a loud thud. Every executive stood completely still, staring at the man in handcuffs. And suddenly, the confident smile on District Attorney Evelyn Carter's face didn't feel quite as certain anymore. The general counsel's briefcase slammed against the marble floor. Thud. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The sound echoed through the lobby before disappearing into complete silence. Every executive stood frozen, not because they recognized a criminal, because they recognized the man in handcuffs. The CEO blinked twice, as if his mind refused to accept what his eyes were seeing. Mr. Walker, his voice barely rose above a whisper. Jason looked at him. Good morning, David. The CEO's face went completely pale. Oh my God. The younger security guard frowned. You know him? David didn't answer. He hurried across the lobby so fast, he nearly slipped on the polished marble. Every executive followed. The district attorney watched them, confused. What are you doing? Nobody answered her. David stopped in front of Jason. For several seconds, he simply stared at the handcuffs, then looked at the officers, then back at Jason. His breathing became noticeably heavier. Finally, he spoke. His voice was shaking. Who put these on him? Nobody answered. Not immediately. The younger security guard stepped forward confidently. I did. David slowly turned toward him. You? The guard smiled proudly. Yes, sir. He claimed he owned the company. David closed his eyes. Just for a second, almost as though he was trying to prepare himself for what came next. When he opened them again, the calm executive everyone admired was gone. What exactly did he say? The guard shrugged. He kept insisting he was here to run the company. A few employees laughed quietly. David didn't. Instead, he looked at Jason. Sir, I'm so sorry. Jason smiled gently. You don't owe me an apology. David swallowed hard. No, I absolutely do. He turned back toward the security team. His voice suddenly thundered across the lobby. Take those handcuffs off HIM. The entire building flinched. The younger guard froze. Sir, I said now. His voice echoed through the marble atrium. Nobody had ever heard the CEO yell before. Not once. The police officer immediately reached for the cuffs. His hands were noticeably less steady than before. The metal clicked open. Jason slowly rubbed one wrist. There were faint red marks where the steel had rested. David stared at them. His stomach sank. I'm so sorry, Mr. Walker. Jason smiled again. I know. You were responding to what you were told?" David looked ready to disappear. "No, I should have come downstairs the moment they called. I should have answered the phone. I should have." Jason gently interrupted him. "David," the CEO stopped talking. "Mistakes happen." David looked down. "They shouldn't happen to you." The younger security guard finally spoke. "Wait." His eyes moved between Jason, the executives, and the police. "Who is he?" Nobody answered. The silence itself became terrifying. Finally, the chief financial officer stepped forward. His voice was barely above a whisper. "That's Jason Walker." The guard frowned. "So?" The CFO stared at him in disbelief. "So?" His voice cracked. "He's the founder." Another executive quietly added. "The majority owner." The general counsel finished the sentence. "And chairman of the board." It felt like all the oxygen disappeared from the lobby. One employee dropped her coffee. It shattered across the marble floor. Nobody looked. Phones that had been recording slowly lowered. Mouths hung open. The whispers stopped. Every rumor, every joke, every laugh died instantly. The younger security guard looked back at Jason. "No." He shook his head repeatedly. "No, that's impossible. You drove a pickup." Jason nodded. "I did." "You weren't wearing a suit." "No." "You didn't have security." "No, you didn't." His voice faded. He suddenly realized every assumption he'd made had been based on appearances. Nothing else. Across the lobby, the receptionist slowly covered her mouth. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew something wasn't right." Her supervisor couldn't even look at her. The police officer took off his cap. "Mr. Walker, I owe you an apology." Jason shook his head. "You did your job." The officer frowned. "No, I accepted someone else's conclusion without asking enough questions." Jason looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "That takes honesty to admit." Everyone's attention shifted toward District Attorney Evelyn Carter. She hadn't spoken, not once, since the CEO called him. "Mr. Walker." She looked from Jason to David to the executive team, then back again. Something wasn't adding up. Finally, she asked the question that suddenly terrified her to hear answered. "Who exactly is Jason Walker?" David slowly turned toward her. His expression had changed completely. There was no anger, only disbelief. "You don't know." She felt the first knot form in her stomach. "No." David took a slow breath, then answered. "You're looking at the man who built this company from a rented warehouse. The man who employs more than 12,000 people. The man whose foundation has funded half the legal aid clinics in the state. And," he looked directly into her eyes, "the man who personally approved your office's largest public justice grant last year." The color drained from Evelyn's face. For the first time in her career, she couldn't think of a single word to say. The color drained from Evelyn Carter's face. She stared at Jason, then at David, then back again. No, that couldn't be right. She knew Jason Walker, not personally, but everyone in the legal community knew the name. He was famous for one reason. He avoided publicity like it was a disease. There were only a handful of public photographs of him. Most were years old. Most had been taken from a distance. She'd never expected to meet him. Certainly not. Like this, the lobby remained deathly silent. No one laughed anymore. The phones that had been recording moments earlier had quietly disappeared into pockets. People suddenly remembered. Those videos still existed, and if they were uploaded, every face laughing in the background would be visible. Evelyn slowly looked down at the open handcuffs lying on the marble floor. Then, at the red marks still visible on Jason's wrists, she swallowed. Hard, David broke the silence. "Mr. Walker, I don't know how to apologize for this." Jason looked around the lobby, at the frightened security guards, at the embarrassed police officers, at the employees who suddenly couldn't meet his eyes. Then he quietly said, "You already have." David frowned. "I don't understand." Jason smiled. "Everyone here has learned something today." The younger security guard looked completely broken. He took one hesitant step forward. "Mr. Walker." Jason turned toward him. The young man's voice trembled. I'm sorry. I judged you before I asked a single real question. I thought." He stopped, unable to finish. Jason waited patiently. Finally, the guard forced the words out. "I thought someone dressed like you couldn't possibly own this place." The confession echoed through the lobby. Nobody argued, because everyone realized they thought exactly the same thing. Jason nodded slowly. "Thank you." The guard looked confused. "Thank you. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong." The young man lowered his head. "I don't deserve your kindness." Jason smiled gently. "Kindness isn't something people earn. It's something people choose." Several employees felt their faces burn with embarrassment. One woman quietly deleted the video she'd recorded. Another followed, then another. Within moments, dozens of phones were unlocking. Videos disappeared one after another, not because anyone ordered them to, because shame had replaced entertainment. Across the lobby, the receptionist quietly wiped away a tear. She looked at her supervisor. "I told you we should have called upstairs." The supervisor couldn't answer. He simply nodded. The older security guard stepped toward Jason. "I owe you an apology too." Jason shook his head. "You asked questions. You hesitated. You weren't certain." The older guard looked surprised. "You noticed that?" Jason smiled. "I notice everything." The guard gave a sad laugh. "I wish I'd trusted my instincts." "So do I." One of the police officers stepped beside Evelyn. "Ma'am." She didn't answer. She was still staring at Jason, trying to remember. Then it hit her. 2 years earlier, a courthouse renovation project had nearly been canceled after funding disappeared. Legal aid offices across the state were preparing to shut down. Hundreds of low-income families would have lost access to legal representation. Then, an anonymous donor stepped in. $25 million. No interviews. No press conference. No naming rights. Just one condition. No one would ever know who gave the money. Only a handful of senior officials had been told the donor's identity. For legal reasons, Evelyn had been one of them. Jason Walker. Her stomach twisted. She slowly looked back at him. You. Her voice barely worked. You were the donor. Jason answered quietly. I don't like seeing justice become something only wealthy people can afford. Several people looked at him in disbelief. No one had known, not even David. Evelyn suddenly remembered something else. The grant David mentioned. Her office had proudly announced it. She had stood behind a podium, given interviews, accepted praise, called it a victory for equal justice. She'd thanked community partners. She'd thanked politicians. She'd thanked sponsors. The one person she had never thanked was standing 10 feet away, with fresh marks on his wrists. Because of her, she slowly walked toward him. Gone was the confident prosecutor. Gone was the sharp smile. Gone was the woman who had entered believing she'd already won. She stopped in front of Jason. For several long seconds, she couldn't speak. Finally, I owe you more than an apology. Jason looked at her calmly. You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. She took a shaky breath. I embarrassed you in front of your employees, in front of law enforcement, in front of strangers, and I involved your daughter. Her voice cracked on the last sentence. I had no right. Jason's expression softened. For the first time, there was genuine sadness in his eyes. You're right. The words landed harder than anger ever could. He continued quietly. Not because of me. He looked toward the lobby windows, where somewhere beyond the city, Lily was sitting in school. But because one day, my daughter will see how quickly the world decided what kind of man her father was. Silence, heavy, uncomfortable, unavoidable. Evelyn lowered her head. She had spent her career telling juries not to rush to judgment, to wait for evidence, to question assumptions. Yet this morning, she had done the exact opposite. Not inside a courtroom, but in front of hundreds of people. And there wasn't a legal argument in the world that could defend it. Then Jason reached into the worn canvas bag that everyone had silently judged all morning. He pulled out a simple blue folder. He handed it to David. David opened it. His eyes widened immediately. He looked up at Jason. Today's board meeting. Jason nodded. I came early because I wanted to surprise everyone. David slowly closed the folder. His voice was almost a whisper. You walked in carrying the company's 5-year expansion plan. He glanced at the handcuffs, still lying on the floor. And instead, you were treated like a criminal. No one in the lobby could bring themselves to look Jason in the eye. The silence had become unbearable. Just minutes earlier, people had laughed, recorded videos, whispered insults. Now, the only sound left was the quiet rush of the waterfall flowing down the marble wall. David slowly closed the blue folder. He looked at the executives standing behind him. Does everyone know what today was supposed to be? Nobody answered. One by one, they shook their heads because they hadn't. Not completely. Only David and Jason's executive assistant had known the real reason for the meeting. David looked back at the crowd. Mr. Walker didn't come here for publicity. He didn't come to inspect anyone. He didn't come to fire anyone. His voice became heavier. He came because today he was going to announce the biggest investment in this company's history. The lobby remained silent. People exchanged nervous glances. David continued. A 5-year expansion, 3 new headquarters, over 4,000 new jobs, scholarship programs, paid apprenticeship opportunities, and a child care center. He paused. Inside this very building, several employees looked at each other in disbelief. Jason quietly added, "Too many good people leave great jobs because they can't find someone to watch their children." A young mother standing near the elevators suddenly felt tears welling in her eyes. She'd spent months struggling to balance work and daycare. She had complained about Jason just minutes earlier. Now, she realized the man she'd mocked had been trying to make her life easier. David looked around the lobby. "Mr. Walker asked us not to announce any of it. He wanted to walk through the building first, to see it the way every employee sees it. No reserved parking, no security escort, no executive treatment, just another person walking through the front door. He wanted the truth, not the performance people put on when they know the owner is watching." The words struck everyone differently. The receptionist remembered how she'd wanted to make one more phone call. The older security guard remembered the hesitation in his gut. The younger guard remembered laughing. The police officers remembered accepting someone else's conclusions. The employees remembered every whisper, every smirk, every assumption. Jason slowly looked around the lobby. "I'm glad it happened." The sentence stunned everyone. Evelyn frowned. "Glad?" Jason nodded. "If I had walked in wearing an expensive suit, arrived in a limousine, surrounded by security, today would have told me nothing." He looked toward the employees. "But today, I learned something valuable. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed too loudly." Jason continued. "I didn't learn that people are cruel. I already knew fear can make people jump to conclusions. What I learned," he looked directly at the younger security guard, "is how quickly appearances become evidence." Then he looked at the crowd. One person made an assumption. The next person trusted it. The next repeated it. And within minutes, a complete stranger had become a criminal. He paused, not because of facts, but because enough people believed the story. The words hit the lobby harder than any shout could have. The police officer slowly removed the small notebook from his pocket. He looked at the report he'd started writing. Then, without saying a word, he tore the pages out, folded them once, and quietly placed them in a nearby trash bin. Evelyn finally found her voice. "I've spent 20 years asking juries to wait for evidence." She looked at the marble floor. "This morning, I didn't even follow my own advice." Jason answered gently. "None of us are immune to making mistakes." She looked up. "The difference is what we do after we realize we've made one." David turned toward the security team. His face hardened. "All of you." The younger guard closed his eyes, certain he was about to lose his job. David continued. "Report to Human Resources immediately after this." The guard nodded quietly. "I understand." But before David could say another word, Jason raised his hand. "David," the CEO stopped. Jason shook his head. No. David looked confused. Mr. Walker, they handcuffed you. They humiliated you. In front of the entire company. Jason smiled faintly. I know. They should be dismissed. Jason looked toward the young guard. The young man couldn't even lift his head. Then Jason asked a question that no one expected. If we fire someone every time they make one serious mistake, how many people would still have jobs by the end of the week? Silence. Jason continued. I've made mistakes. So have you. So has everyone standing in this lobby. The purpose of leadership isn't to punish every failure. It's to make sure people don't repeat it. David slowly nodded. Understanding, Jason walked toward the younger security guard. The young man finally looked up. His eyes were red. I don't expect you to forgive me. Jason smiled. I'm not interested in revenge. He extended his hand. I'm interested in what happens next. The guard stared at the offered hand. For a moment, he couldn't move. Then, with trembling fingers, he reached out and shook it. Jason looked him in the eye. Tomorrow, when someone walks through those doors wearing worn-out boots, what will you do differently? The young man's voice cracked. I'll ask better questions. Jason smiled. No. The guard looked confused. Jason gently corrected him. You'll see a person before you see their clothes. The young guard felt tears roll down his face. He simply nodded, because there was nothing else to say. At that exact moment, a small voice echoed through the lobby from the revolving doors. Daddy. Jason turned. Every head in the building turned with him. Standing just inside the entrance, with a backpack hanging from one shoulder, was Lily. And the moment her eyes landed on the faint red marks around her father's wrists, her smile disappeared. Daddy, she smiled again. Then she noticed the red marks around his wrists. Her little smile disappeared. She slowly walked toward him. What happened? Nobody answered. Not the police, not the executives, not the employees, not even Evelyn, because no explanation sounded acceptable anymore. Jason knelt in front of his daughter. It's okay. Lily looked down at his wrists again. It doesn't look okay. She gently touched one of the marks. Did somebody hurt you? Jason smiled softly. No, sweetheart. I'm all right. She frowned. Then why are they there? Jason looked around the lobby. Hundreds of eyes were watching, waiting, wondering what he would say. He could have blamed the guards, the police, the district attorney. Instead, he looked back at Lily. Sometimes, people make mistakes. Lily thought about that. Big mistakes. Jason nodded. Sometimes, she looked around at everyone staring. Are they sad because they made one? Jason smiled. I think so. The little girl looked toward the younger security guard. His eyes were still red. She slowly walked over to him. He immediately knelt down. I'm sorry, he whispered. I scared your dad. Lily looked at him for several seconds, then asked the question only a child would ask. Did you mean to? The guard immediately shook his head. No, I really didn't. I thought I was doing the right thing. She nodded slowly. My teacher says, good people can still make bad choices. The guard felt another tear roll down his cheek. Your teacher is right. Lily looked back at her father. So, are we still having pancakes? The question caught everyone completely off guard. Jason laughed, the first genuine laugh anyone had heard from him all day. He opened his arms. Lily ran into them. He hugged her tightly. I made you a promise. She smiled against his shoulder. You always keep your promises. I try. The lobby felt different now. Lighter, not because the embarrassment had disappeared, because something more important had replaced it. Perspective. Evelyn slowly stepped forward. She looked at Lily, then at Jason. I owe both of you an apology. Lily looked up at her father. Who's she? Jason answered gently. Someone who made a mistake. Evelyn closed her eyes. The words hurt because they were true. She knelt so she was eye level with Lily. I'm sorry. I judged your dad before I knew who he really was. Lily tilted her head. You didn't know my dad. No, I thought I did. Lily smiled innocently. Lots of people think they know him. The executives couldn't help smiling. Jason laughed quietly. She's right. Evelyn stood again, then turned toward every employee in the lobby. I've spent my career asking people to believe in justice. She paused, but justice begins long before a courtroom. It begins the moment we choose whether to judge someone by evidence or by appearances. She looked directly at the employees who had recorded videos. And today, I failed that test. No one tried to comfort her. She wasn't asking for sympathy. She was accepting responsibility. David stepped beside Jason. Mr. Walker, the board meeting can wait. Jason smiled. It already has. He looked toward the employees gathered throughout the lobby. I think this meeting was more important. He slowly turned to face everyone. Before I leave, I'd like to ask all of you one question. Nobody spoke. If I had arrived wearing a $10,000 suit, would today have happened? Silence. Not one person answered, because everyone knew the truth. No, Jason nodded. Then the problem was never my clothes. It was our assumptions. He let those words settle, then continued. We live in a world where people are respected before they're known, or dismissed before they're heard. A janitor, a delivery driver, a mechanic, a security guard, a single parent. He looked around the room. They all deserve the same respect you'd give a CEO, not because of what they own, but because they're people. He glanced down at Lily. She reached for his hand, ready for pancakes. She grinned. I've been ready all day. Jason looked back at the crowd one last time. I hope the next person who walks through these doors wearing worn-out boots never has to teach this lesson again. Then he smiled, because the best apology is changed behavior. Without another word, Jason picked up the old canvas messenger bag that everyone had silently judged. He took Lily's hand. Together, they walked toward the revolving doors. No security escort, no applause, no cameras, just a father keeping the promise he had made that morning. Tonight belongs to Lily. The glass doors slowly closed behind them. No one moved, not for a long time. The younger security guard looked down at the empty spot where Jason had been standing, then at every person entering the building. This time, he smiled warmly. "Good afternoon. Welcome." It didn't matter whether they wore expensive suits, construction boots, or faded jeans. Each person received exactly the same greeting. Because one ordinary Monday, a single father had walked into his own building wearing worn-out boots and quietly reminded everyone that character has never worn a uniform.